Right, Stephen, this has now been recorded, so please behave. Otherwise, it will be distributed and disseminated to all the other members. Don't look at me funny like that. Okay, so basically what I was saying is I want us to actually have a look at this incident that occurred during the course of the week and dissect it a slight bit in order for us to understand the importance, the necessity, and why at the end of the day we, especially as amateurs, should in actual fact ensure that we have got communications that work. So throughout the dissecting or post-mortem of this incident, it is no reflection on anybody whatsoever, because it can happen to anybody at any time, at any place, for any reason. And, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, preparedness is something that needs to be shared with everybody, and the need to be prepared, to be able to react, to be able to respond to situations that can occur during the course of just ordinary daily events. Okay, so I need to clear the timer every few minutes, so please bear with me on that. ZS6OPS returning. Wow. Okay, Rory, message received. I wonder what's going on here. Okay, well, okay, let's look at this particular incident. During the course of the week, we had a young gentleman who in actual fact broke down. It's as simple as that. Just a normal, ordinary, daily event of breaking down on the highway. In this case, was on the November 1, and it was in the Nasrec vicinity. But how quickly did events in actual fact change? Because the information that was sent through was quite simply the fact that he got robbed on the side of the highway. Now, guys, this can happen to anybody. Fortunately, he wasn't injured, wasn't harmed, lost a couple of bucks, used some initiative and actually managed to get the vehicle to move away and get to a place that was safer for the time being, and was still able to retain his cell phone or keep his cell phone in his possession. So what turned out to be a breakdown turned out to be a mugging, which turned out to be a situation that could have been a lot worse. Now, some of the problems that came up, and I know that Rory, for example, and I were in contact, so I'm going to ask Rory for some input shortly. But one of the biggest problems from my perspective was the lack of communications. And by this I mean that this particular person was not in direct contact with any person or any other person for a long period of time at a time. In other words, he'd make an outgoing call, convey some information and disconnect the call. Somebody else would phone him, they'd have a quick chat, discuss something, disconnect the call. In the interim, from my side, I was trying to get assistance out to him. Assistance was already on his way. ZS6OPS returning. Somebody else was already on his way to his location. However, nobody was in contact with that person. So we've got a person in trouble, assistance en route, and several other players who were in contact or trying to make contact with the person in trouble and the person en route. So let's just bring it down to, let's say, 2 additional people. The only people that were in contact with each other were the 2 additional people include myself, make it 3, and all of that was done by WhatsApp. The ZS6 OPS returning. So the end result was quite simply that whilst I was on the landline trying to get hold of SAP, I was also trying to get an exact location in order to give the exact location to SAP. The one person who was in contact with the person that required assistance unfortunately gave a generalized area. So this now, in actual fact, meant that I didn't have the relevant information, which resulted in SAP disconnecting my telephone call, which happened on 3 separate occasions. By the time that the third disconnect happened, then a particular message or pin drop was sent through, but by this time it was too late. SAP had disconnected for the third time. Rory, being the second person, on the other hand, in actual fact, now, Stephen, I see you bringing up two Zoom meetings, eh? You want me to have it in stereo? Okay, cool. All right, so Rory was the other person who was now trying to make contact with the person in need and the person that was on their way to assist, and was also unable to establish contact. The third person that was in contact with the person in need was also backwards and forwards, too short to call. And needless to say, Rory put the call out on one of the other groups where a security company was dispatched, or tactical response unit was dispatched to the location and was able to stand by with the person that was in need. So what I would like to do is, that being the background, I want to hand this over to Rory. And I'd like Rory to give some comments from his perspective. And when Rory is finished, then I'll just pick up and round up on it. And then we'll go over to some questions and answers if there are any. Rory, ZS6RBJ, ZS6OPS.
Yeah, we like to say when all our sales doesn't, but in this case, when all our sales revert to WhatsApp. So it would have been probably a different story if we had had radio contact with everybody in the loop, but it's not always going to be possible, of course. Not impossible, but not always going to be possible. This is unlike many cases that we would be involved in personally, but it's not the first time that we've required first responder assistance and we've had to use radio communications to call for that. There's also been times in the past where we've required radio communications and we haven't had it on us. I've recently become accustomed to just carrying the handheld with me wherever I go. The other day I left it at Cad's place after having coffee there, and honestly felt like something was missing because the next day I didn't have it with me. So you do get accustomed to it eventually, and it's something I think that you should all try and to move forward to. So from my side, we were fortunate enough to have a communication platform where we could get hold of the relevant first responders, sort of on a one-to-one basis. And somebody who was happened to be nearby made his way there and stood with the chap until help arrived. So I think that overall it turned out okay. Having radio communication made life a lot easier. It also would have allowed us to contact the person directly and say, listen, this is the story. Do you need assistance? Do you not need assistance? Because that took a little bit of time to just clarify over WhatsApp before we send people unnecessarily. You never want to phone emergency services unless you know it's actually absolutely needed. It's frustrating, I'm sure from Chad's point of view, to get disconnected from SAP. I've heard it a few times recently. There were comments on the WhatsApp group afterwards regarding this, Unfortunately, it's a reality these days. I don't know why it happens. Maybe it's because they heard it was Chad calling, I'm not sure, but yeah, it's a reality, and it's just another thing to contend with. In terms of emergency communications, we must remember that it doesn't only come down to the amateur band. Sometimes commercial bands can come into play. It can just be any number of communications methods. This time it just happened to be cellular and WhatsApp, which is not too big as best piece, but it did manage to get the job done at the end of the day. If it was anything more serious, though, I don't think it would have had a happy ending, to be honest. It would have been the time frame between getting somebody out using WhatsApp and when help was requested was far too great. So that's my blabber. Chad, back to you. That is 6 OPS, that is 6 RDJ.
All right, thanks, Rory. Before I continue there, I just want to check, are there any other callings that want to get added to the end of the list quickly? ZS6 IPS standing by.
Romeo, good evening, everybody. Sorry for being late.
All right, Vaughan, I acknowledge you there. Are there any other call-ins? Arthur, are you listening? I see you sending me messages that you did call and I haven't acknowledged you. ZS6 IRT, ZS6 IPS. All right, nothing heard. Let me move on in the interim there. Okay, so guys, there you got the background to what actually happened without mentioning any names. Now, the point that I want to bring up, and the reason I wanted to do a post-mortem on this, you know, whenever you have a situation and you are the person that is making contact with the authorities or other agencies, there's a couple of recommendations that you need to follow. And the first one is, well, firstly, know the telephone number that you're going to contact. Otherwise, it doesn't help. You end up phoning fire for SAP and, you know, vice versa. Okay, in this case, they do interconnect. So, well, at least sometimes they do. But what I'm trying to say is know that you know your emergency contact telephone numbers. The second thing is know your location. And you need to be specific in terms of the location. So if you are in the suburban areas, always give the street name and the nearest intersection to you. And if you know the two intersections that you are sitting between, always convey that information to whoever you are reporting your problem to. The third thing that you need to really and truly understand when phoning the authorities is to always stay on the line until they tell you it's okay to disconnect, because they may need additional information. Now, I suppose this can work both ways. They also need to understand that sometimes you need to get the information to give it to them. So those are three important things that you definitely need to follow. The fourth one, naturally, is to describe the incident as best possible, but it's not always advisable to ask for specific services. So you need to describe your situation quite clearly to the people that you are reporting to. Now, in our case, if it's information that we get in as part of any group we are on, whether it be over amateur radio or any other radio, and you find yourself in a position where you can be one or two people. The first one is the person in contact with the person who requires assistance. ZS6 IPS returning. The second is you could be the person who is going to make contact with the authorities. regardless of which two you are, I want to concentrate on the person receiving the information. What we need to really understand and train ourselves to do moving forward is that do not, under any circumstances, disconnect a call, if it is a cell phone call, with that person. Keep them on the line. If it means that you've got to get up, let's say, for example, you're sitting in an office and you get a telephone call, and you know now you're going to have to make contact with others, keep that person on the phone with you. And find an alternate method to communicate with other people. Another cell phone, an office phone, a radio, whatever the case might be. As a very last resort, if you are home alone and you've only got one telephone, then naturally, to phone SAP, for argument's sake, you might have to either disconnect the call with the person or put them on hold and make the second telephone call. Whatever happens, try not to disconnect with the person who is in trouble. And then if you are in actual fact being a relay station between the person in trouble and another station that will actually make the telephone call to the authorities to provide the necessary assistance, always retain contact with that person as well. Now, I still maintain we need to break away from technology. Because, as Rory said, this thing could have gone south and sideways very quickly, very suddenly, and through various sources. Like, for example, cell phone towers could have failed. Data, bandwidth, airtime could have run out. All of these factors can come into play. However, if you find that that is what you are using, stick to it and stick to the rules. And the rules are quite simply retain contact with the person that you are getting the information from, whether that is from a relay or from the person that is involved or requires assistance. ZS6IPS returning. And of course, know the questions that need to be asked, exact location. If you're on the highways, in particular the highways, if you need to take a walk up the road, find the first mile marker, give that location if need be, if you don't know the location, but relay as much information as possible. So the post-mortem that I wanted to do was, do not disconnect telephone calls. Stay on the phone. Even if there is nothing to be said, stay on the phone. If assistance arrives, then also just make contact through that call with one of the guys or girls, whatever the case might be, and tell them that you will stay on the phone until you come to a point where the people involved actually report back that all is okay. Then disconnect your calls. All right, so that's basically the PM that I wanted to cover. Training, you can take a very specific topic. It can be 10 minutes, other times it can be half an hour. In this case, 15 minutes. So let's throw this out to the group now, to the net, and find out, are there any questions? And we'll either answer it at the end of your over, or I might bring it into the end there. ZS6GGA, ZS6OPS.
ZS6OPS in the net, ZS6GGA returning. Good evening, everybody. Nice to hear everybody up. Okay, no comment from my side. Thank you very much, John Rory, for the point. All very valid and noted there. Thanks very much. Oscar Papa's here.
All right, thanks again. And Devin has just let me know that, yeah, now Ghana's internet connectivity is not, what does he say, poor Wi-Fi signal. There we go. So basically, he's dropped off of Echolink and is not following. Now, if this were a situation, well, I think we could be in a bit of a predicament. Fynand, ZD6 Whiskey Mike Bravo, ZD6 Oscar Papa Sierra.
ZD6 Whiskey Mike Bravo returning. I think I've got no problem on this. ZD6 Whiskey Mike Bravo.
Okay, thank you, Fynand. Batters, ZD6 Victor India Lima, ZD6 Oscar Papa Sierra.
That young man, find out what is he feeling, what is wrong, why is it disconnect, as long as what is he feeling, what could be done to increase the safety for himself as well as for people, or even make the communication much better. That is okay, something that is
All right, yeah, no, Batters, I think that is something that we can have a look at, and we can possibly bring it back at a later stage and continue with this. Right, moving on. ZD6 SCO, ZD6 OPS.
Jake, I've got a question. On Friday, for the first time, I actually went out and I left my phone at home. Now, my radio is permanently in my vehicle. So, should I have had an incident, I've got the radio with me. Is there any specific people that I can call for assistance for anything? Or do I just jump on the repeater and say I need assistance? Or is there something like a handnet that they're always monitoring? Or I don't know if anybody's always monitoring for specific frequency. Is there anything like that? Or do we just jump on the repeater and say, oh, the district appears, the district is here?
Okay, Norman, I think we'll cover that one at the end there. Let's move on. Steve, ZD6XU, ZD6 OPS.
Yeah, good evening from ZD6XU and special evening to you. It's been a while. And as per usual, your nets always relate to something important. And sometimes it takes people a while to figure things out. We'll discuss that when I see you. Hopefully I'll see you on the 25th. Maybe pop into the clubhouse for a bit. Very interesting exercise, and I think your story about trying to talk to the SAPS, it seems to be the standard problem that the people there don't understand or get distracted. But we'll get to that, and thank you again for running the meeting tonight and the Zoom. I didn't log into the Zoom because it sometimes just falls over the side, so until I solve that problem, which I will discuss with you, and I'll sort that out. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you soon. ZD6
All right, great stuff. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, it has been a while. Who's next? Mr. Adrian. You see, this week I remembered you, and I see Mike has sent a message through that he's following the conversation, but the signal is weak. So, Mike, if you're here, I'll put you down here on the list. But, Adrian, I somewhere missed you last week, so I'm not going to miss you this week. ZD6SNY, ZD6 OPS.
ZD6 OPS and the net, Chad, yeah, it was actually this incident that you were talking about. I was actually privy to sit and monitoring the whole situation, and I have a comment to make. And I think the comment was that the persons involved, the person that was next to the road and the call that came in were closely related, and there was a how can we say, a factor of panic setting in. And I think this is one thing that we will have to try and master ourselves, is when there's a situation, is actually to try and be able to handle the panic situation or the onset of panic that happened, and that was, I think, in the core why certain of the communications actually broke down in this incident.
Okay, Adrian, I don't know if you dropped out there, or if something else, if you actually ended your over, because you just disappeared. Perhaps you could just confirm whether that was the end of your over. And Stephen, I hope you realize I am monitoring the screen that you're sharing with me. So you best be careful where you go to. ZS6SNY, ZS6OPS.
ZS6OPS, no, I think it's the PTT switch that's troubling me on this side. No, I finished up, but the main crux of my message was that there was an onset of panic, and especially with the dropping of communications and breakdown. I think that is one thing that we will have to train ourselves into handling better. ZS6SNY.
Yeah, affirmative. I agree with you on that one. Maybe we can turn that part of this post-mortem into training for next week and look at the psychological impact on first responders and those that do provide or are involved in providing assistance. Perhaps I'll put something together for next Sunday and we can cover that aspect of it there. So, Adrian, perhaps remind me. I'll make a note here, but remind me in any event. Rory, I'll bring you in last. Let's move over to Stephen. ZS6SJR, ZS6OPS, and maybe you should disconnect the screen share so that I can get my screen back over.
I was just testing it out, Chad. I wanted to see how it actually works. Yeah, I was aware that you had it in front of you. And I did get a call once from F&D. There is a side assist where they actually send if you break down the thing, you can send a dial your number, they find your location immediately, and they send the security to assist you on the side of the road. I lost their details. I have it somewhere, but I know that does exist. But any last thing from our side, that's all. 36, okay, 36, just everything.
Yeah, no, affirmative there, Stephen. Yeah, that FNB assist is normally for FNB card holders, Petra card holders. Several of the card holders do offer similar type of assistance. That number is normally on the back of the card, and it just depends on the type of service. All right, and Zoom, the screen sharing actually works exceptionally well, just a matter of interest. It is something that we will be using both on air and off air for further training moving forward, as soon as all the training materials have been prepared and completed. Okay, Mr. Gordon, let's hand it over to you. ZS6 Alpha Golf Echo, ZS6 Oscar Papa Sierra.
ZS6 Alpha Golf Echo. Yeah, while you were all discussing, etc., I was just thinking that how vulnerable we are and how poorly our emergency systems work when we hit a crisis situation. And immediately, I think that brings on the panic is that you realize how badly our support structures are, and I can almost say how hopeless they are. So it makes me think that before you even go on a simple journey, one better be see that you are prepared, that your batteries are charged on your phones, and that you've got fuel in the car, and possibly even have a firearm with you. And that's about my only comments. And thanks for the net. Thanks for running the net. I'm going to go QRT now. I'm visiting your birthday group here. So good evening to you all. Have a lovely week. ZS6AGE going QRT. Thank you for the group.
All right, thanks, Gordon. Now, I wonder if Devin has been able to reconnect, so I'm gonna have a look. I'll give him an opportunity. If not, I'll move on there. ZS6 Alpha Charlie on Echo Link. ZS6 OPS leaving a long gap for you. Over. Okay, I take it he's dropped off completely. Marco, ZS6 NEU, ZS6 OPS.
Thanks very much, Chad. I do appreciate it. And guys, I can tell you, I called one day OPS on a matter. We couldn't get hold of one woman. He has actually helped us. Didn't get hold of her. And the cell phone was off. And thanks to Chad and all the guys, it's helpful, very much helpful. Chad, one thing there I want to mention high responsibility. Yeah, get contact with the person that you just said tonight a few times. Get contact with the person that you help. Yeah, Chad, tonight I actually learned a lot. Thank you very much for this net. I think we can all learn. And yeah, having that vote, I failed that vote a few weeks now. Very much thank you, Sophie. At night, every day, and Chad, keep up the fantastic work on my side. It's appreciated, and I think that all have to be. So this is OPS, so this is November and 24.
Thanks, Marco. Really appreciate those comments. Yeah, some might not, but I definitely do. But thanks a lot. Right, Mr. Vaughan, ZS6 Victor Lima Romeo, ZS6 Oscar Papa Sierra.
This is ZS6 OPA, ZS6 VLO in the group. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to make one comment there. Getting a standard operating procedure, so getting SOPs with regards to handling emergent situations. I think we need to have a look at something there. If we look at the way the messages and all that went, there was a couple of questions asked that were never answered. There were too many guys asking questions, and I think that added to the frustration or the panic that set in. So definitely looking at a SOP with regards to handling a situation like that is something that we're going to look into. There is SOP and there is CR.
Vaughan, no, I agree with you 100% on that one. With regards to a standard operating procedure, I think that is something that definitely would have to form part of the training manual for net controllers, which in itself, I think this is a good opportunity to cover this point very quickly now, and it highlights the need for every station that is on that particular frequency, or in this case, the WhatsApp group, or during the incident, the period of time of that incident, to absolutely follow the instructions 100% without question of the net controllers. You have to allow the net controllers, and you know, when we were covering net control stations before, last week and the week before in particular, that is the person that is responsible, and you could have more than one net controller or persons that are running certain aspects of a particular incident or operation. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you have got nothing worthwhile contributing, I've said it before, MCOM operators will in actual fact spend the majority, listen carefully, the majority of their time listening on the other side of the radio. We would not, in actual fact, be on air over, etc. So you've got to follow your net controllers. We've got to follow some form of standard, as Vaughan put it, operating procedures. And this is why it is important for MCOM operators to be trained at all levels. You've got the, I know Rory's going to sit back and start laughing now, the MITs, what I refer to, the man in the street. Doesn't make a difference who you are, what you are, but you're the boots on the ground. Then you've got your net controllers, you've got your base stations, you've got your relay stations. You could have subnet controllers, and each and every single person has a specific responsibility. And part of that responsibility, there is specific training that each person would have to go through. And I know that in terms of this net, we average about 15 people, anything between 10 and 15 people per week. I've said this before. I know I've got to hand over to Stephen and to Rory. I've said this before. The net is open to any radio amateur. As long as you've got your ICASA license, you are more than welcome to join us, to participate, have an input, get involved, and move forward. And in so doing, my goal is ultimately to bring radio operators up to levels whereby they can, in actual fact, operate as boots on the ground or as MITs, the man in the street, operate as net controllers, subnet controllers, base stations, relay stations, whereby that accurate, correct information is passed in order to avoid loss of life. And Steve, XU, said that I have this tendency of taking real life incident and utilizing it for training purposes. And Steve is 100% correct in that. For those of you that are on frequency, that Steve hasn't joined us, Steve has had some valuable input over the last couple of years, both on the technical side as well as in other areas during training sessions such as this. And Steve will understand fully because of a stint that I pulled once before. What I mean by doing things and designing training and exercises for failure. Our incident this week, fortunately, did have a positive outcome without much input or participation, but we were available to assist in various ways. Stephen, I've had you, VLR, I called up. I don't know if Mike is going to be able to come back, but let me give it give him a chance there. Failing which, I'll give it over to Rory. But before I give it to you, Rory, I think Stephen wanted to ask something. ZS6 MPR, ZS6 OPS.
ZS6 MPR. I don't know how you can receive me in the chat, but like I said, I'm on the ECRN at the moment, but a really interesting topic, there's nothing to add.
All right, good stuff there, Mike. Yeah, nice to hear you up for a while there. Got you 5 out of 5. Rory, standby 1, ZS6 SJR, ZS6 OPS.
ZS6 OPS returning. Chad, I wasn't talking about the roadside assistance. I was talking about it's a security assistance. It's called Project Help. It's cost you probably just over 100 rand for your entire family, and you get a number on your phone. It's a code. You send in the code, they track where you are and send a security guard to your location with immediate effect to assist and basically guard you on the side of the road. It's a very good service. I've been trying to get it connected, but FNB tends to give me problems with my debit order on it, so I have to try and get that done manually. I'll repeat, it's called Project Help. It's projecthelp.co.za. It's not assistance on the side of the road, it's protection on the side of the road. ZS6 OPS, ZS6 SJR.
Oh, guys, sorry, I've got to laugh there. You know, Stephen, I'm going to play this part of the recording back, I think for you in particular. But again, guys, you know what? Stephen is 100% correct, but there's something in that statement that he made that actually proves that technology is a point of failure. And in this case, Sure, a bank name was mentioned and a debit order was failing. In other words, Stephen's got no protection. That is absolute and total failure. Guys, we need to start concentrating on utilizing our radio networks. That is what it is ultimately going to come down to. And I'm not talking about just the repeater networks. I am also talking about the simplex networks. Now, I've still got to come back on a question there that Norman asked, but Rory, please go ahead. ZS6 RBJ, ZS6 OPS.
Yeah, nothing substantial to add from my side, Chad. I think you've covered everything that I can think of. ZS6 OPS, ZS6 RBJ.
All right, good stuff. Guys, I think in closing, I want to cover the question that Norman, ZS6 Sierra Charlie Oscar, asked with regards to how do you go about getting assistance? Well, that's what it boils down to. His statement was, do you just call up, or is there somebody specific to call? Well, guys, ultimately, you know what? This is where it now becomes a problem for me because of the passion that I have with regards to emergency communications, emergency procedures, disaster relief, disaster management, or whatever the case might be. And a lot of people have this tendency to speak others out of doing things in such a manner that all of us, doesn't make a difference who, would ultimately have the confidence and be comfortable. Now, Stephen, sorry guys, I've got to digress here a minute. I don't know, did your Zoom freeze? Because you like giving me the look there and it's solid, static, no movement. So I don't know if you died on the Zoom, Stephen. Okay, going back to the point of we should have the confidence, each and every single one of us, regardless of what radio network you are on. But right now we're on amateur radio. Norman shouldn't be asking a question of who do we call. Norman should be able to make the statement, guys, we can pick up the microphone and stipulate that we got a problem and somebody will come back and assist us. That's ultimately what should happen. And it should happen on any radio network, Charlie Bravo as well, which is why, funny enough, the regulations actually cover this particular aspect of radio communications for citizen band radio and specify that the emergency channel, i.e. channel 21, may not be used for anything else except emergencies. And that's a very important factor within the Charlie Bravo side. So regardless of which network you're on, guys, you know what? Commercial networks, in whatever nature they are designed or put together, those guys that utilize radios, ZS6 OPS returning, know that if they pick up their microphone, there's somebody on the other side of the waves. I want to just leave it at that. Citizen band radio is exactly that, citizen band. But with cell phone networks coming into play, citizen band radio has sort of gone out the window because that was the entrance level into citizen band or citizen communication capabilities. However, there are still people that are on CB radio, and then there's amateur radio. And how many of you that are listening to 625 tonight are confident that if you pick up a microphone in time of need, that there will be somebody out there to be able to assist you, day or night? That is a question that needs to be asked of every single radio amateur But there is a second question that I believe should definitely be asked and answered. Which of the radio amateurs are willing and prepared to actually put themselves in the position of being capable and able to sit back and say, yes, I can help? That is a question that every radio amateur should answer. And if I annoy anybody on this air tonight, one word: shame. That's all I can say. Because we still need to be able to look out for other radio amateurs. And the only way that we can provide, as an individual, any form of assistance to any other radio amateur, regardless of who you are, what you are, or where you are. We, as an individual, need to step up to the plate and say, you know what? Even if I'm going to be mobile and on the road for the next 10 minutes, let me at least call up ZS6IPS returning. Let me at least call up and announce that I'm here. And when I switch off 10 minutes later, just let everybody know you're not here. Because in that 10 minutes that you are on the road, you might be the one that can actually pick up some other radio amateur in need of assistance, stop your vehicle, revert to technology, pick up the telephone and phone SAP or an ambulance, and become, as the IARU Constitution stipulates, a service within amateur radio and not a hobbyist. So my question to every radio amateur that is listening tonight: are you one of those guys who is prepared to put yourself in a position, regardless of what others might say or think or feel about you or your cause or anything that is absolutely irrelevant ultimately at the end of the day? Are you prepared to put yourself into that position whereby you make yourself available as an amateur radio operator to actually get up and be assistance to somebody else? Now, for those of you that are on my general chat group, I sent out a pretty interesting statement. Fair enough, it's drawn from the United States of America. However, I believe it's relevant in South Africa today. And it goes along these lines. I just want to clear the timeout timer. Right, ZS6IPS returning. Here's the statement that is made. There's only 2% of the population who can work in emergency services. Just listen carefully to that. There's only 2% of the population who can work in emergency services. Now, the official term EMS, or emergency services, covers the police, the fire, the emergency medical services, and the dispatchers. These are the guys that are professional. They paid. But you've still got your auxiliary forces. You've got reservists, you've got volunteers. Oh, by the way, as radio amateurs, that's exactly who we are. We do it on a voluntary basis. In other words, we do it with the intent of not receiving anything for gain. In other words, we do it that we are not paid for it. But this statement goes on and it says, and most of the other 98% are judging how they do it. So let me just read that in context so people can go and have supper. There's only 2% of the population who can work in emergency services. And most of the other 98% are judging how they do it. So guys, just think of the question. And when you get your answer, then you can determine how much time you're going to put in, how you're going to make yourself available. And that is something that needs to be coordinated and put together as part of the plan, as part of the standard operating procedures, so that people like Norman don't need to ask that question. Okay, on that note, I think we've been at this for an hour. I'm going to close the net tonight. I want to thank each and every single one of you for calling in this afternoon. Thanks for the participation. Questions are excellent. Just remember, no question is a stupid question. And if we don't know the answers, we can always find out the relevant correct answer and give it to you at a later stage. So on that note, moving forward for this week, be safe, be prepared, and of course, be happy. This is ZS6 OPS releasing 145.625 for general use. 7-3, everyone. I'm out.
I've been listening with great interest, but being mobile, I kept my mouth shut.
Don't run away, Stephen. I want to talk to you.
Much appreciated. I think we have learned a lot about this. And me as I am, and all our fellow operators in South Africa, we are here as AMs, and we are here to serve our country. Have a great evening. Thank you very much. This is November 18th.
All right, thanks, Marco. Catch you later. Jan, nice to hear you come up there. I've added you to the list as well. But even if you are mobile, please feel free to call in, man. I really appreciate it and enjoy having you on the nets. ZS6 IPS clear. 7-3 all.